This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Iggeres HaRamban. We continue in the words of the Ramban. The Ramban says that by training oneself to speak benachas under all circumstances, then one is able to overcome kas, which is a midah ra, to cause a person to sin. Now there's another midah, and that's the midah of kapdanos. The Gemara says in Shabbos on Daf Lamed Aleph, one should always be humble like Hillel, and one should not be a kapdan like Shammai. Now certainly Shammai was not an angry person. That's the worst of all the midais. So what's the difference between kapdanos and kas? Kapdanos is a midah of accustoming oneself with midas hadin not to tolerate infraction. But it's not a midah of anger. It's a midah of sort of not accepting imperfection when the imperfection is wrong. It's not anger, it's sort of being intolerant of wrongdoing. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter explains that the same way Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue throughout Kol HaTorah Kula, so they argue how one should accord themselves in general. Should one be tolerant of wrongdoing, or should one be intolerant? And Shammai's shita was to be makbid, and Hillel's shita was to be an anvasan. However, the midah of kas is a completely different midah. The midah of kas is a midah of anger. So the midah of anger is pasul according to everybody. So let's think of for a moment the order of operations of the Ramban, because the Ramban says that b'chashar tinotzel min hakas, when one saves himself from anger, tala al libcha midas ha'anava, will arise upon your heart the midah of humility. She midah toiva mikol hamidos hatoivos, which is the best midah of all the good midahs. Now, we could be medayik in the lashon of the Ramban. The Ramban says it will arise upon your heart. Where will it arise from? What does it mean it will arise? The Ramban should say, when you save yourself from anger, you will acquire the midah of humility. Why does the Ramban say? What does the Ramban even mean? It will arise upon your heart, the midah of humility. I believe what the Ramban refers to is a concept that is brought in Mesilas Yesharim, that Mesilas Yesharim teaches us that all the good qualities are already programmed into the neshama. It's a matter of accessing them. The pasuk says in Mishlei, "Mayim amukim chachma belev ish, ve'ish tevuna yidlena." The heart are deep waters, which means that the neshama is a deep reservoir of good quality. One just has to access the divine qualities that are already programmed into the neshama. So by saving yourself from anger, it will cause to rise up the midah of humility. Now, so let's think about the recipe. The recipe is train yourself to speak softly, which is the midah of tolerance. Guard yourself from anger, and then you will get to the midah of humility. What isn't the first step already the midah of humility? Isn't training yourself to speak softly already humility? So clearly not. Rashi says on the pasuk, "V'ish Moshe anav ma'od." Moshe was very humble. How does Rashi translate anav? Rashi says shafal v'savlan, low and tolerant. So while one may be somewhat tolerant by speaking softly, they have not yet acquired the fullness of the midah of humility. So by training yourself to speak calmly, softly, and by guarding yourself from anger, this will bring to the midah of humility, which is the best midah of all the midahs. Now, how do we know the midah of humility is the best midah of all the midahs? So Rav Goldberg and others cite the Gemara in Avodah Zarah on Daf Chafel and Beis. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Anava Gedola Mikulan. Humility is the greatest of all of them. Now, what does that refer to? Humility is the greatest of all of what? So So the Gemara says, Amar of Pinchas ben Yair, and this is the brisa that Mesilas Yesharim is based on. Torah brings to Zehirus, Zehirus brings to Zrizus, Zrizus brings to Nikios, Nikios brings to Prishos, Prishos brings to Tahara, to Chasidus, to Anava, to Yiras Chet, to Kedusha, to Ruach HaKodesh, to Tchias HaMesim. And the Gemara says, Chasidus is Gedoyla Mikulan. Shenamar oz dibarta b'chazoin la chasidecha. And says Gemara that argues on Rabbi Shua ben Levi, because Rabbi Shua ben Levi says Anava is greater than all of them, like it says Ruach Hashem Elokim Alai Yan Mashach Hashem Oisi Levaser Anavim. It doesn't say Chasidim Ela Anavim, so we see Anivos is the greatest of all of them. So we have this brisa, we have a machlokes. What's the greatest of all the midos? Is it Chasidus or is it Anava? Now, in the opinion that Chasidus is the greatest of all of them, how does that work if Chasidus brings to Anava? So the Sefer Oyel Yaakov points out that would only work out according to the Girsa of the Rif. The Rif's Girsa is Tara brings to Kedusha, Kedusha to Yiras Chet, Yiras Chet to Anava, Anava to Chasidus. And Chasidus is greater than all of them. And Rabbi Shimon Levi says, no, Anava is greater than all of them. And this is what most Rishonim learn. Rabbeinu Bechaye, Rabbeinu Yoina, the Riyaz, the Sefer HaManik, the Sefer Eshkol, the Ran. So why wouldn't it say Ruach HaKodesh is the greatest of all of them? Because that's not a Middah. Ruach HaKodesh is a Matana. But from the Ramban, it seems like he doesn't learn that Gersa that Anivos brings to Chasidus, because he learns that Anivos is the greatest Madrega. But furthermore, the Ramban learns, as we're going to see, that humility brings to Yiras Chet, and according to this new Gersa, Yiras Chet brings to Anava, not Anava brings to Yiras Chet. One minute. And
without being an anav, it could be an anav.
The Roikeach's Girsa and others that follow him, and the Ramchal, do not really mention Chasidus at all. So we'll have to try to understand, but according to the Ramban seems to understand that the highest Madrega is the Madrega of humility. If you remember in the Talmud Devaira, Parak Beis, Rav Goldberg cites, that one has to train themselves with these midos little by little, and the key to everything is Anava. Why? Because that's the Bechina of Kesar, which is the beginning of all the midos. So that could mean, by the way, that just because there are midos that are later on, the earlier Middah may be greater because that's the Middah that brings to everything, which then the Ramban could learn, like the Gersa, that Anava brings to Yiras Chet, and even Anava brings to Chasidus. But the fact that it brings to all of these Middos, that could be its greatness. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says like this, Daf Peichesam Beis. The Gemara says, what is a ben oilam haba? Anvesan ushfal barach. Says the Marsha, because Anivos is Middah el yoina sheba midais. As well as Reb Zundel of Salant writes, Klal kol hamidois hi midas ha'anava, ki kol hanisyoinois yivuto mi midas ha'anava. He says all challenges in life dissipate through humility. So let's end off with the following question. The Ramban continues, how do we know humility is the greatest of all of the Madregos? Shenemar, Ekev Anava Yiras Hashem. What does that mean, Ekev Anava Yiras Hashem? So Rashi on Mishlei says two pshatim. Either through humility comes the fear of God, or Anava is the Iker, and Yira is, so to speak, the Ekev, the heel, the midras of humility. Now, the Ramban, who's learning that humility is the greatest of all the Madregos, Shenemar Ekev Anova Yiras Hashem, would seem to be learning like Rashi's second shot, that Ekev Anova Yiras Hashem, the heel of humility is fear of God. That fear of God is the heel. And meaning that humility is the Iker, and the fear of Hashem is subsidiary to it, is the Ekev of it. And that's how we see it is the greatest of all madrigos. The only problem is, the Ramban continues, that Anivus brings to Yira, which seems like he's learning the first pshat of Rashi, that through Anivus it comes to Yiras Hashem. Well, in that case, how do you see from the pasuk Ekev Anova Yiras Hashem that humility is the greatest of all traits? Unless you say, like we said at the start, that the fact that humility brings to other character traits doesn't mean it's not the greatest, just the opposite. The fact that it leads to so many good things is indicative of its status of the greatest of all the midas. Okay, Rabbi Isai, we will hold it over here. Wishing everyone a great day. Shir tonight at 8:30. Hope to see everybody. Kol Tov, have a great night. Oh, and further, 7:45 tonight is another Shir on Purim, streaming live on Torah Anytime. So 7:45 Torah Anytime, followed by 8:30 on Torah Anytime and Zoom. Kol Tov, everyone. Have a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.